So we've completed our location, which means we can close this here and open up the next section, which is type of violence. Now this is what occurred. Now we've put riots and damage to property. So let's add a violence act. Now there are several here that you can choose from: disturbance, killing, assault, detainment, vandalism or destruction, theft by explicit force, dueling, other violence, and unspecified violence. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail because those sorts of explanations are available in the course handbook. But first of all, what's clear, for instance, is that there's riots, which is a mass disturbance. Therefore, we can click disturbance. Now, for each of these types of violence, you can add further detail. So for all disturbance entries, you must add 2 further details. Whether or not it's described as riot. So if the word riot, rioting, or rioters is used to describe the disturbance, then record as yes. This is known as riots at the recent election. Therefore, we go to referred as riot and yes. Now for all disturbance entries, we also need to add a second further detail, which is the size of crowd. Now, how many people were involved in the disturbance if known? This is so we can know whether it's a giant riot involving thousands of people or whether or not it's just a couple of dozen acting out. Now, it makes no mention at all of the scale or size of the riot, therefore we would choose numbers not mentioned at all. Now, there are different options, so say for instance it talks about dozens or hundreds or any such vague mention of the size of a riot, then you can click range given, in which case you would go back up to the comments and put dozens. If a specific number is mentioned, so say 4,000 rioters, then you would add 4,000 in the comments. But for our purposes, no numbers are mentioned. I should also add that there is a possible further detail that you can add, which is planning. Now, was this consciously planned in advance, or did it take place without any prior planning? Or was it planned, but there were also spontaneous elements in it? So effectively you can choose organised, spontaneous, or both. Now, realistically, not many of articles are going to mention this explicitly. Therefore, this is something you would use quite sparingly. So what we'll do is we'll delete further detail 3 here. So what we've got here initially is disturbance. Now you notice there that it reverted to unspecified there. It's always good to check once you've finished each thing whether or not it reverts, because that does sometimes happen. So we've got disturbance, referred to as riot, yes, and size of crowd. We're not saying anything about whether it's spontaneous or organised. What else happened? Well, if we go back up to our summary, riots and damage to property occurred. So we add a violence here. Vandalism or destruction. Now you'll notice I'm not adding any further detail, and I can't emphasize this enough because a few people have done this, that the options for whether or not something is referred to as a riot or the size of crowd are only to be added below disturbance entries. If there is no disturbance, then these riot and crowd options do not have to be added, so there is no further detail for vandalism or destruction. You can add the spontaneous or planned further detail for any of these on the list, but as there's no information on this, it will not be added. You'll also notice as well that there are contested buttons up and down this page here. Now there's good reason for that. A lot of newspapers are partisan and deny or contest what other people have said about events. So say for instance you get a letter to the editor where it talks about this election riot in Halifax and it says, actually there was no riot at all, there was no disturbance, people are just exaggerating, in which case that disturbance would be contested. If a letter to the editor says, yes, there was disturbances during the election, but it was by no means a riot, then this would be contested. If a letter to the editor says, there was indeed some rioting, or there wasn't some rioting, but there were not hundreds as some have suggested, there were only dozens, this size of crowd that you've put in would be contested. The same is true of vandalism or destruction or any of these other ones. If they suggest that no assaults occurred despite what others have said, then this would be contested. At any rate, what we've got for Halifax here is a disturbance which is referred to as a riot. We do not know anything about the size of the crowd, and we know that because there was reparations for damage done to property, we can also add vandalism or destruction. There is no mention about spontaneity or planning explicitly, therefore we did not add those at all.